So like we have all of these Interop protocols with layer zero, hyperlane, wormhole, axelar. Like everyone has their token standard, and the pitch there is to like make these tokens the chain's canonical tokens, right? And Stargate is probably the perfect example of like balancing AMMs with interop token standards in Hydra, and that's the competition for intent based models. Like how do intents compete with a token or like a bridge that has the rights to issue the token, right? Like you can just mint the token at any amount or like any size. So, like you said, if you want to bridge $10 million, maybe intents are not the way to go. But with OFTs or like Hydra, you can practically mint any amount of tokens. So, how do you see like that competition dynamic shape up?
Yeah, I think first of all, they're not mutually exclusive because even with the token standards, it's not going to be as fast as intents. And just to clarify, it could be. There's nothing stopping a token standard kind of relaying the messages in a second. It's just risky. And so I think the way the way to think about it is like who takes on the risk, and you can kind of have this like spectrum from global risk, which means all token holders take on the risk, right? So if like the default kind of like security of the token is sending messages too fast and not waiting to see if the origin chain finalized, then that's kind of taking on global risk, because if it sent a message and then there was a reorg, then kind of everyone, all token holders kind of suffer. And then you can have like a middle ground, which is what I would argue kind of like Stargate pools, like the main Stargate product is, which is you've got LPs that opt into kind of like taking some pooled risk basically, and they're kind of like, so in the classic Stargate, you can move USDC from kind of base to Arbitrum, and you've got these pools and kind of messages are passed. And once I complete my bridge kind of from base to Arbitrum, I've just got native Circle USDC, nothing to do with Stargate. Stargate just helped me get from A to B. And so like I'm actually taking kind of temporary risk maybe like whilst the bridge is in progress, but once I get my funds on the other side, like I'm taking no risk. Whereas the people who have pooled in Stargate, are taking some risk around kind of what Stargate is. So that's kind of like the middle ground of like a group of actors is taking some risks, and you can go faster in that, but you still maybe don't want to go too fast because you've got like a set of actors that kind of don't want, you're still kind of like they're acting as a group, and so you kind of need consensus over like let's at least wait like a safe period. And then what's interesting about intents is you have like the extreme where it's like a single actor, a single solver is taking all the risks themselves. They're basically saying, oh, cool, I've seen this transaction on the origin. I'm not going to wait any confirmations. I'm just going to go. And the only person that loses if the solver goes too quick and then there's a reorg is the solver themselves. And so you kind of isolate the risk in that one solver. And that's why kind of generally speaking, intents can be faster because you can isolate the risk. So there's nothing stopping a token standard going fast or a pool-based system going fast, but they generally, because it's like shared risk, you kind of are more conservative. But when you have isolated risk, you can go faster. So long story short, that's kind of why solver kind of intent protocols can be faster. And so, for example, Ape Chain, where kind of all of the assets are OFT on that, we still do a lot of volume as like a fast instant layer on top of the kind of 2-minute time that you can kind of move Ape between Arbitrum, Ethereum, and Ape Chain. So like I think the two of them still fit together nicely in terms of it's not like token standards are going to replace kind of intent standards. In many ways, it makes our life of rebalancing way easier. I'd much rather kind of 2 minutes to rebalance my inventory than 7 days. But it certainly maybe kind of like squeezes the value prop, and so you're just kind of like a thin layer on top. But I still think for most users they're better off going by the intent protocol than directly to the underlying bridge, and that's generally my kind of view on it. Where like the canonical bridges, whether it's a built-in rollup bridge or a kind of interop protocol token standard, are kind of like the wholesale kind of rails. And end users should almost never need to use those. They'll kind of always use almost like it's equivalent to kind of bank, the kind of bank-to-bank transfers. But then you've got the credit card network, and most users are just doing most of their transactions in the credit card network, and banks are settling kind of between them. And I think there's a similar analogy with bridging. So I do think the two of them fit together quite nicely. And then it is, though, interesting to think about, whether chains. It's it's kind of a funny thing, basically, where securing assets is kind of like the whole point of blockchains. And so it's an interesting thing that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, if it's a good thing or not, that you have like increasingly assets that aren't actually secured by the chain they're secured by like the DVN that they're kind of,
Mm-hmm.
or the ISM of the token standard. And I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with it. I think there's definitely like a lack of visibility. Like, I have no idea what the Layer Zero Labs DVN is. Like, is that a multisig? Like, how? Like, do you know what it is? Like, there's like not as much visibility. Like, there needs to be like a L2 beat for
Mm-hmm.
DVNs, basically, and a bit more kind of understanding of like what the security is there. And so I think that's one of my kind of criticisms of just like, it's very opaque. And in some ways you're foregoing kind of like rollups have this like multi-year research to figure out a way that you can have a less trusted sequencer, but you're still inheriting the security of Ethereum. And then people are like, I'll just, ship it with a DVN, Layer Zero Labs, that'll do. And it's like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
even taking advantage. It's not secured by the rollup at that point or by Ethereum. It's secured by kind of the
Yeah.
lowest risk. So yeah, I think there's some criticism, but like I very much get the kind of appeal of it. They're like native multi-chain, and it does actually make intent protocols easier to layer on top. And I think they both fit together. But I think the last thing I'll say is canonical bridges, like roll-up bridges, are getting better. Like zero knowledge ones are kind of coming down from 24 hours. I think ZK Sync came down to 3 hours. You're seeing optimistic roll-ups kind of like consider replacing or like complementing the 7-day optimistic challenges with kind of ZK, kind of like succinct, OP succinct, these sorts of things. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if the kind of canonical bridges, if they get better, if there's like less of a reason to kind of like take the risk on a third party kind of DVN securing your token, if you get kind of like pretty good
Mm-hmm.
roll up bridging, although that's not going to get you to somewhere like Solana. But I think one of the nice things about intents is because they solve a lot of the users' pain points in terms of getting a really good UX, you can maybe then, when you're thinking about your token, not take as much risk in the token. Like, just use the canonical bridge. True, it might be slow and expensive to bridge it, but intents are going to solve most of the pain points. And so you can keep the kind of global risk as low as possible. Anyone holding the token is kind of not assuming a ton of risk if intents can kind of solve most of the UX problems on top. But there's still, the intents are actually going to cost more on top of a canonical bridge with a 7-day withdrawal than an intents on top of a kind of OFT with a 2-minute withdrawal. So there's absolutely trade-offs. And we'll see how it plays out. And yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around it, and I can definitely see the advantages of it. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think you've touched on so many different threads here. So let's say like intents are for users, right? Like that's I think everyone has a good understanding that intents and chain abstraction are solutions for users, and they make user experience just so much better than it was 2 years ago, right? But when it comes to the developers, chains, and ecosystems, that's where the Interop token standards kind of come into the picture, right? So you mentioned a few different points. So like there's concerns about like shared security of interop protocols, but I feel like chains themselves are not that secure anyway, right? Like they're also running their own sequencer. So at this stage, I'm also of the opinion like these interop protocols have been running for multiple years. They're improving their security. So the shared security standard is actually improving.
Just to jump in, I'm
Yeah.
sure the protocols that that one interesting thing is people often say like layer zero is very secure. And I'm sure layer zero is extremely secure. It's
Mhm.
almost like every DVN needs to be evaluated on its
Yeah.
security. And by the way, layer zero labs DVN is incredible track record, securing a ton of value. It probably is more secure than most L2s. But yeah, anyway, sorry to interrupt, but it is kind of like another pet peeve of like, it's almost like people say, and we're secured by layer zero, and kind of
Yeah.
like, but actually it's like this modular kind of like different, which is, layer zero is not hiding that. It's like the core features that you can have like different levels of security that, again, it's almost like we need that like stage 1, stage 0,
Mhm.
stage 2, like clearer ways to like grok, like what is the actual security.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of lump up every different design into this. But like if you think about it, Axelar is their own chain, right? So I would definitely argue Axelar as a chain is so much more secure than some of these new rollups, right? And you're right in saying that, okay, when we're talking about layer zero or hyperlane, and we need to kind of assess the risks of these specific DVNs or ISMs. And I feel like it will happen at some point. But then if you argue like which is more secure and robust, layer zero's DVN or some of these sequencers, I'm probably going to vote for like layer zero's DVN, right? So I feel like in general, the security standard is improving. And at this point, I don't see why we should not have interop token standards see more adoption because of the benefits, right? Like you're right in saying the native bridges are getting better, so the speed will improve. But then there's still no way for us to get assets from like Solana to this new rollup, right? And the only way to do that is through some of these token standards. So I feel like intents and token standards and like interop protocols, they're all improving in the right direction, and there's a world where both of them win eventually.
Right. Yeah. Even in the world where token standards, all tokens are issued on multi-chain token standards and secured by kind of effectively, yeah, you're decoupling the security of the token from like any one chain, and it's kind of got this separate security, which is fine if that's really secure. Even in that world, I think you'll still have intents for that reason, that you don't want to push the speed too high on the kind of token standard, because then that's global risk of all token holders if you make a mistake there. So it's like nice to be able to kind of like keep it conservative and then layer on intents.